The soil sang when the first colonists arrived, a low, resonant hum that vibrated through their bones. Vrythos sprawled before them, a tapestry of cobalt forests and rivers that shimmered like liquid mercury. The air smelled of petrichor and something sharper, metallic, as if the very atmosphere had been forged in the belly of a star. They called it Bloodsoil in the initial reports, a joke about its rust-red hue. No one laughed when the crops sprouted overnight, fat and golden, roots coiled like lovers, fingers around the seeds. Dr. Lyra, the mission's xenobiologist, knelt in the fields on the seventh sunrise, her gloves caked in dirt that clung like powdered rust. She sliced her palm open on a serrated stalk of wheat, a careless accident. The soil twitched. By dusk, the wound had knitted itself shut, and the surrounding crop stood taller, their leaves edged in bioluminescent veins. She buried her bloodied bandage that night. By dawn, a sapling had erupted from the spot, its bark streaked crimson. The colonists toasted their luck with synth gin, their laughter echoing beneath Vrythos' twin moons. They did not notice the roots thickening beneath the barracks, nor the way the shadows pooled darker where the graveyard would one day lie. They marveled at the planet's generosity, its hunger disguised as symbiosis. Only the soil knew the truth. It remembered. It waited. Chapter 1. New Covenant Colony, Vrythos. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of freshly tilled soil. Kaden stood at the edge of the crimson fields, his boots sinking into earth that glistened like wet rust. Dawn light filtered through the canopy of serpentine trees, their leaves hissing in the humid breeze. He pressed a thumb against the scar on his palm, a relic from the first harvest when they had learned the soil's price. The memory coiled in his gut, the way the dirt had shuddered as it drank, the roots twisting upward like beggars' hands. Inside the colony's central dome, the council chamber hummed with the low thrum of desperation. Colonists clustered in factions, their shadows warping against the bioluminescent walls. The Crimson Accord wore armbands stitched with thorned vines. The pale horizon had daubed their throats with ash, a silent protest against the blood rites. Kaden's gaze lingered on Zaria Sail as she entered. She moved like a blade sheathed in linen, all contained fury, her hands stained with soil and something darker. Her sister's absence was a hollow space beside her. They will hate you for this, he thought, but hatred is lighter than a coffin. He unrolled the yield projections onto the holotable. The numbers pulsed red, a slow bleed of metrics. Silence pooled as he spoke. The next harvest requires 12 donors, voluntary, 1 liter each. A lie. The soil's hunger had grown teeth. He had buried the true numbers. Murmurs erupted, a storm of fear and fury. A man from the pale horizon spat at the table. We are not livestock. Zaria stepped forward. Her voice was cool, precise, a scalpel slicing through noise. You have not told them the rest, Commander Torin. The roots are not passive. They adapt. They remember. She placed a vial on the table. A tendril of sangui's vine writhed inside, its bioluminescence flaring blue-green. They cluster beneath the infirmary, the dying call to them. You feed this planet pain, and it learns to crave it. Kaden's jaw tightened. He had seen the roots burrow into the graveyard, had heard the whispers of corpses drained to parchment. But survival was a math that ignored ghosts. If we do not feed it, it will take. Choose the lesser evil. Evil is not a scale, she said. It is a choice. The chamber lights flickered. A low vibration shuddered through the floor. Zaria's vial shattered. The vine lashed out, embedding itself in a man's forearm. Screams erupted as the walls cracked. Thick roots erupted, dripping with viscous sap. Kaden grabbed a pulse rifle from the wall, his mind fracturing into tactical fragments. Flank left, ignite the sap, protect the exits. Zaria was already moving. She plunged a syringe into the soil, injecting her own blood. The roots recoiled, hissing. They track hemoglobin, she shouted. Create a perimeter with anything organic. He tossed her a grenade belt. Explosives, burn them. No fire agitates them. She hurled a grenade into a cluster of vines. The blast scattered glowing spores. Follow the light, they avoid their own residue. They herded survivors into the fungal forest beyond the dome. The air reeked of ammonia and decay, the ground spongy underfoot. Bioluminescent mushrooms cast jagged shadows, transforming the pale horizon's ashen throats into spectral visages. Kaden counted heads, 12 missing, 12. The number gnawed at him. Zaria crouched beside a young boy trembling in the ochre ferns. Her hands, steady and sure, pressed a damp cloth to his neck wound. "Do not look at it," she murmured. "Breathe. Inhale the musk of the caps, it dulls fear." Kaden watched her. He had expected disdain, the moralist's sneer. Not this competence. "You have done this before," he said. She did not glance up. "My sister believed in your cause. She donated 3 times before the roots took her in her sleep. I studied the patterns, learned the triggers." A pause. "You do not deserve her sacrifice." The words should have kindled anger. Instead, they carved something hollow in his chest. He thought of the war on Eridanus IV, the civilians he had abandoned to save his squad. "Duty is a clean cut," his old commander had said, but the wound always festers. Night deepened. The survivors huddled beneath a rock overhang, the fungal glow painting their faces in sickly hues. Kaden cleaned his rifle, the motions ritualistic. Zaria sat apart, her journal open, sketching root patterns with a charcoal stick. He noted the way she chewed her lip, a crack in her ice. "You think there is another way," he said. She closed the journal. "I know there is, but it requires something you lack." "And what is that?" "Mercy." A root burst from the ground. Kaden fired, the pulse round searing through tendrils. Zaria shoved the boy aside, rolling into the fray with a vial of blood. She smashed it against the root's core. The vine spasmed, emitting a subsonic wail that rattled teeth. When it retreated, she stood breathless, her sleeves torn, blood welled on her collarbone. Kaden reached for her, but she stepped back. "Do not," she said. "It is watching, learning." He let his hand fall. Above them, the canopy stirred, 1,000 roots swaying like hanged men. Derelict Research Outpost, Western Sector. The outpost emerged from the mist at dawn, a skeletal ruin half consumed by a colossal sanguis vine. Zaria traced its thorns, her fingertips brushing dormant buds. "It is dormant for now." Kaden scanned the perimeter. Fleshy pods clung to the walls, pulsing faintly. "You believe your data is intact." "I believe the planet wants us to see it." She pressed her palm to a biometric lock. The door hissed open, revealing a lab overgrown with sinewy roots. "It is a test, a predator assessing its prey." Inside, holograms flickered, a prior research team's final days. Kaden watched a scientist inject his arm into the soil, his face ecstatic as flowers bloomed. Then the footage fractured, roots dragging him screaming into the earth. Zaria slotted a data chip into the console. They thought it a symbiosis, but symbiosis requires consent. He leaned over her shoulder, the screen flooded with glyphs, root patterns coalescing into a language. "You can read this." "Not read, feel." She pressed a hand to the soil. A root caressed her wrist, leaving a phosphorescent trail. "It is lonely and hungry, 2 things we understand well, do we not?" For the first time, Kaden did not have an answer. Chapter 2. The fungal forest drew breath. Its canopy of bulbous, bioluminescent caps exhaled spores in languid clouds, their amber light dappling the ground in wavering patterns. Kaden Torin adjusted the strap of his pulse rifle, the weight familiar against his shoulder, though the terrain was not. Behind him, Zaria Sale knelt, her fingers splayed over a patch of mycelium. The threads pulsed faintly beneath her touch, a subterranean heartbeat. She had not spoken since they left the colony's graveyard, where the roots had already begun to gnaw at the fresh graves. Let her brood, Kaden thought. Anger is a compass when the path is dark. They moved in tandem, a rhythm forged through hours of silent traversal. The air clung to their skin, damp and sweet with decay. Kaden's boots sank into the spongy earth, each step releasing a puff of iridescent dust. He scanned the shadows, the way the stilted mushrooms lined like sentinels, the faint skittering of arthropods beneath the leaf litter. Survival here was a language of twitches and tremors, and Vrythos spoke in a dialect of threat. Zaria paused beside a fallen log, its bark split to reveal a nest of writhing sanguis vines. She unclipped a vial from her belt, her jaw tight as she pricked her finger. A droplet fell. The roots recoiled, hissing. "They are mapping us," she said, her voice a blade in the stillness. "Every step, every wound." Kaden grunted, "Then let them learn fear." She did not look at him. Fear is a feast to them. Did you not read the reports? He had also burned them. Reports were ink, survival was blood. The marsh emerged at dusk, a vast expanse of oily water veiled in tendrils of mist. The air reeked of sulfur and spoiled fruit. Kaden crouched at the edge, probing the water with a stick. It came up corroded, pitted with holes. "Acid," he muttered. "We circle around." "There is no time." Zaria unshouldered her pack, withdrawing a roll of synth fiber cloth. "Wrap your legs, move quickly. The water reacts to body heat. Prolonged exposure will melt bone." He watched her bind her calves, her movements efficient, clinical. She had tied her hair back with a strip of leather, revealing the scar on her neck, a pale, jagged line from a vine's whip. A survivor, he acknowledged, like me. They waded in, the water seared through the cloth within minutes. Kaden focused on the pain, let it sharpen his mind. Halfway across, the mist thickened. Shapes loomed, petrified trees, their branches clawing at the violet sky. A low hum vibrated in his molars. "Do not stop," Zaria warned. The first root struck from below. Kaden fired blindly, pulse rounds sizzling through the water. The root retreated, but another lashed around Zaria's ankle. She fell, her cry stifled as the acid kissed her cheek. Kaden lunged, grabbing her wrist. The root pulled, relentless, dragging them both deeper. Eridanus IV, the child's hand slipping from his grip, the smell of burning flesh. He roared, emptying his rifle into the water. The root severed. Zaria scrambled back, her breath ragged. Blood seeped from her ankle, the acid etching crimson streaks down her skin. "You are hurt," he said. "It is nothing." She tore a strip from her sleeve, binding the wound. Her hands trembled. He almost reached for her, almost. Nightfall found them in a cavern of living rock, the walls threaded with glowing mycelium. Zaria built a fire with dried fungal stalks, the flames casting jade shadows. Kaden cleaned his rifle, the motions mechanical. His leg throbbed where the acid had breached the cloth. She sat across from him, her journal open. The pages rustled as she sketched root patterns, chemical equations, the curve of a human heart. He wondered if she drew her sister's face in the margins. "Why did you stay?" he asked. The question surprised him. Her charcoal paused. "The colony is my responsibility, as it is yours." "That is not what I meant." She closed the journal. "You want to know why I did not join her, why I let her bleed for your cause." Her voice was ice, but her eyes were wildfire. "I stayed to prove her wrong, to prove you wrong. This," she gestured to the cavern, the planet beyond, "is not survival. It is a slow suicide." He tossed a stalk into the fire. "You think your way is better. I think we have not tried it." The silence stretched. Somewhere, water dripped, each drop a timer counting down. The derelict outpost rose from the fog like a carcass. Its metal skeleton jutted through the vines, the walls puckered with fleshy pods that pulsed in arrhythmia. Zaria approached, her breath visible in the chill. "It is watching," she murmured. Kaden scanned the perimeter, scorch marks, empty cartridge casings, a handprint fossilized in sap on the door. What happened here? The first team, they thought to bargain. The planet countered. She pressed her palm to the biometric lock. It screamed, a sound like bending steel, then clicked open. Inside, the air was thick with spores. Holograms flickered, a man laughing as flowers bloomed from his veins, then screaming as the roots peeled him apart. Zaria navigated the debris, her boots crunching on shattered glass. Kaden lingered at a workstation. A child's drawing was pinned beneath a cracked monitor, stick figures holding hands beneath a smiling sun. Earth, he realized, a memory of home. Here, Zaria slotted a data chip into a console. The screen awoke, glyphs cascading. The neural network, it is not malevolent, it is curious, it tests us, pushes us to evolve. He leaned over her shoulder. The glyphs resolved into a map, the root network converging on a luminous core. A brain, he said. A consciousness, she stood abruptly. We can reason with it, offer a pact. And if it refuses? Her gaze met his. Then you may burn it. They argued not with shouts but with the silence between words. Kaden prepared explosives, his fingers steady on the detonator wires. Zaria harvested spores, her vials clinking like wind chimes. The roots came at moonrise. They erupted through the floor, a frenzy of tendrils. Kaden detonated a charge, the blast singing his eyebrows. Zaria hurled vials, her blood mingling with spores to form a corrosive mist. A root speared toward her. He tackled her aside, the world upending. For a moment they lay tangled, her breath hot on his neck. Then she shoved him back, her eyes blazing. Do not touch me. He stood, retrieving his rifle. Would you prefer I let you die? Yes, the word hung between them, raw and bleeding. The roots retreated, leaving the outpost in ruins. Zaria knelt, her hands deep in the soil. It is done, she whispered. The data is uploaded. The colony will know. Kaden studied her, the dirt on her cheeks, the resolve in her spine. She is wrong, he thought, but so am I. They returned at dawn. The colony's lights blinked through the mist, a fragile constellation. Kaden paused at the tree line. They will not listen, not without proof. Zaria adjusted her pack. Then we will show them. He watched her walk ahead, her silhouette sharp against the rising sun. For the first time, the weight of his rifle felt like regret. Chapter 3. The sky wept. Thick amber droplets fell from the bruise-colored clouds, hissing as they struck the colony's fractured biodome. Kaden Torin stood at the edge of the carnage, his pulse rifle cold against his palm. The sanguis vines had come at dawn, a tidal wave of sinew and thorns devouring the eastern barracks whole. Now they coiled through the ruins like conquerors, their bioluminescent cores throbbing in time with the planet's heartbeat. He counted the missing, 23. The number carved itself into his ribs. Zaria Sale stood apart, her back to him, her fingers tracing the glyphs etched into a fallen root. The symbols glowed faintly, a language of light and hunger. She had not slept. He knew this by the tremor in her hands as she packed her vials, by the way her gaze lingered on the infirmary tent where the wounded murmured pleas for morphine. When she finally turned, her eyes were flint. It is time. He nodded. Time was a blade, and they had run their thumbs along its edge long enough. The fungal forest had become a cathedral of rot. Bioluminescent caps towered overhead, their gills dripping nectar that burned holes in the soil. Kaden led the way, his boots sinking into the fetid mulch. Every breath tasted of decay, of spores that clung to the throat like guilt. Behind him, Zaria's footsteps were deliberate, her pack heavy with explosives and syringes filled with her own blood. She had not spoken since they left the colony, but her silence was a language he had learned to parse. She fears failure, he thought, as do I. They reached the acid marsh by midday. The water had risen, a black mirror reflecting the tempest above. Kaden unwound the synth fiber cloth, the blisters on his legs still raw from their last crossing. Zaria knelt, her fingers skimming the surface. The roots are beneath us. They will strike when we are vulnerable. Let them, he tightened the cloth around his calves. We are not prey. She stood, her voice sharp. You misunderstand. We are prey, but prey can negotiate. He almost smiled. Even now, she wielded hope like a weapon. The crossing was a fever dream. The water seared through the fiber within minutes, the acid gnawing at their flesh. Kaden focused on the rhythm of his breath, the way Zaria's braid swung like a pendulum ahead of him. Halfway, the roots struck. They erupted in a spray of black water, tendrils barbed with thorns. Zaria hurled a vial, her blood mingling with the acid to form a corrosive mist. The vines recoiled, their cores dimming. "Run!" she shouted. They stumbled onto the far bank, their legs raw and weeping. Kaden collapsed against a petrified tree, his vision swimming. Zaria crouched beside him, her hands steady as she applied a salve of crushed mycelium. The pain dulled, replaced by a numb chill. "Why?" he rasped. "Why risk yourself?" She did not meet his gaze, because you would not. The root core lay in a valley of bones. The skeletal remains of Vrythos' prior inhabitants, collapsed into dust and twisted metal, littered the ground, a graveyard of failed symbiosis. At the valley's heart pulsed a colossal mass of sanguis vines, their tendrils braided into a luminous, writhing orb. The air hummed with subsonic vibrations, a sound that bypassed the ears to rattle the marrow. Zaria stepped forward, her boots crunching on fossilized rib cages. It is a neural nexus, the planet's mind. Kaden unshouldered the explosives, his fingers deft as he primed the charges. And if it refuses your pact, then you will have your victory. She withdrew a syringe, its barrel filled with a serum of her blood and harvested spores. But you must wait, let me speak. He watched her approach the core, her silhouette small against its radiance. The roots parted, forming a path. She hesitated, then plunged the syringe into her forearm. The serum glowed as it entered her veins, her skin fractaling with bioluminescent patterns. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "Becoming a bridge," her voice echoed, layered with 1,000 whispers. The core shuddered, a tendril lashed out, piercing her palm. She did not cry out. Instead, she sang, a wordless resonance that shook the ground. Kaden's pulse rifle slipped from his grip. He had heard such a sound once long ago in the Warren cities of Eridanus IV, a child's hum as she bled out in his arms. Mercy, he realized. This is mercy. The planet's voice was not a sound but a pressure, a weight that flattened his lungs. You offer pain. Zaria stood rigid, her blood dripping into the soil. We offer balance, blood for life, consent for peace. Your kind takes, you do not give. We learn, she turned, her eyes meeting Kaden's, as do you. The core pulsed, its light intensifying. Roots surged toward her, thorns poised to flay. Kaden moved without thought. He tackled her aside, the thorns grazing his ribs. Pain exploded, white-hot and blinding. Fool, Zaria gripped his arm, her fingers slick with his blood. I had control. He laughed, the sound ragged. Now you lie like me. The roots encircled them, a tightening noose. Zaria pressed her palm to his wound, their blood mingling. Together then. She raised their joined hands, the blood falling onto the core. The vines froze, the pressure lifted. We say you. The roots retreated, the core dimmed, its light softening to a gentle pulse. Zaria sagged against Kaden, her breath shallow. It accepts, a pact, voluntary donations, terraforming aid. He clasped her hand, their blood drying in the strange air. We will need to negotiate the terms. We will. The colony's survivors gathered at the biodome's ruins. Pale Horizon and Crimson Accord stood side by side, their armbands and ashes blurred by rain. Kaden addressed them from a makeshift stage, his voice stripped of its wartime edge. The blood rights end today. We give freely or not at all. Zaria stood at the periphery, her journal open to a sketch of the neural core. She did not smile, but her shoulders had lost their blade-sharp tension. Night fell. Kaden found her in the fungal forest, her fingers tracing the glyphs on a dormant root. He said nothing, simply stood beside her, the silence a fragile truce. She spoke first. You will stay. Oh, yes. And if the pact fails? He touched the scar on his wrist, now mirrored by her own. Then we bleed again, together. Above them, the serpentine trees sighed, their leaves scattering spores like stars.